When people hear the name Ford, they often think of a car brand, an American icon, or the assembly line as a historical footnote taught in economics textbooks. But Henry Ford's true innovation went far beyond automobiles. Ford did not simply build a successful company. He reprogrammed how the modern world produces, consumes, and understands work itself. The revolution Ford sparked was not about speed for its own sake, but about systematizing production so thoroughly that industrial output became predictable, affordable, and scalable in a way humanity had never experienced before. To understand modern manufacturing, you must understand Ford, because almost every factory supply chain and mass-market product still carries his fingerprints. Henry Ford's obsession was not cars, it was process. He believed that complexity was waste and that inefficiency was a moral failure. Early automobiles were handcrafted luxuries, expensive and fragile, accessible only to the wealthy. Ford rejected this model entirely. He did not want to sell cars to elites. He wanted to sell cars to workers. This was not philanthropy, it was systems thinking. Ford understood that a product designed for mass use required a production method designed for mass repetition. The product and the process had to be reinvented together. The moving assembly line introduced in 1913 was the physical manifestation of this belief. Ford did not invent the assembly line itself, but he perfected it by breaking production into discrete, standardized tasks performed in a fixed sequence. Instead of workers moving to the product moved to the workers. This inversion collapsed production time, reduced skill requirements, and eliminated variation. A Model T that once took more than 12 hours to assemble could now be built in under 2. This was not incremental improvement. It was a phase shift. The consequences were enormous. Costs plummeted. Prices dropped. Cars became affordable to the very people who built them. Ford famously doubled wages to $5 a day, not out of generosity alone, but because he needed a stable workforce and customers who could afford his product. This created a self-reinforcing loop: higher wages, increased productivity and demand, which justified higher volume, which lowered costs further. Ford did not just build cars. He built a closed economic circuit where production and consumption fed each other. This model became known as Fordism, and it reshaped the 20th century. Factories around the world adopted standardized processes. Jobs became specialized and repetitive. Output became predictable. Middle classes expanded. Entire cities were reorganized around industrial rhythms. Ford's ideas escaped his company and became societal architecture. Modern capitalism's obsession with efficiency scale and uniformity owes more to Ford than to any other individual innovator. Yet Ford's system carried hidden costs. The same efficiency that made products affordable also made work monotonous. Humans were treated as extensions of machines. Creativity was stripped from labor in favor of repeatability. Ford himself was suspicious of change once his system worked. The Model T remained largely unchanged for years, while competitors began to innovate in style and variety. Ford believed that customers should adapt to efficiency, not the other way around. This rigidity eventually became a liability. Internally, Ford's authoritarian control mirrored his manufacturing philosophy. Decisions were centralized. Dissent was discouraged. The system worked brilliantly as long as conditions remained stable. When markets evolved, flexibility mattered more than raw efficiency. Ford's reluctance to adapt nearly cost the company its leadership position. This tension between standardization and responsiveness is one of the most enduring lessons of Ford's legacy. Still, even Ford's failures reinforce his importance. They reveal the limits of pure efficiency when separated from human variability and market change. Later, manufacturers learned to blend Ford's discipline with flexibility, creating lean production systems that preserved efficiency while reintroducing adaptability. But even these systems exist in dialogue with Ford's original blueprint. You cannot improve upon something unless it exists first. What makes Ford unique among innovators is that his ideas outlived his products. The Model T eventually disappeared. The assembly line did not. Today's factories, from electronics to food processing, still operate on principles Ford normalized: task, decomposition, standardization, flow, optimization, and economies of scale. Even digital production and software pipelines echo these ideas in abstract form. Ford taught the world to think in systems, and it is exactly here that the deeper question of Ford's revolutionary role begins to emerge, because once efficiency becomes the dominant value of production, society must eventually confront what is lost in the pursuit of uniformity: speed and cost reduction, and whether the same systems that unlocked mass prosperity can evolve to value flexibility, sustainability, and human meaning without collapsing under their own weight. And that unresolved tension is the unfinished thought we must now carry forward into the next part, where Ford's manufacturing revolution is examined not just as an economic triumph, but as a force that still shapes how we work, consume, and define progress today. And when this unresolved tension is carried into the post-industrial world, Henry Ford's legacy becomes more complicated, because the system that once liberated millions through affordability and access now sits at the center of debates about meaning, sustainability, and human dignity at work. The assembly line solved the problem of scarcity, but it did so by narrowing the role of the individual within the system. What was once revolutionary efficiency slowly hardened into routine, and routine, when repeated at global scale, reshaped not only factories, but expectations about what work should feel like. As the 20th century progressed, Fordism spread far beyond automobiles. Appliances, food, clothing, electronics, and even services adopted the same logic: break tasks down, standardize outputs, minimize variation, maximize throughput. This logic created abundance on a scale previously unimaginable. Yet it also trained societies to equate progress with speed and volume rather than with resilience or fulfillment. When efficiency becomes the dominant metric, anything that cannot be measured in units per hour risks being dismissed as waste, including creativity, rest, and craft. Ford's system did not intend this outcome, but systems rarely care about intention once they scale. Manufacturers eventually encountered the limits Ford himself had brushed against late in his career. Markets demanded variety, workers resisted monotony, supply chains faced shocks that rigid systems could not absorb gracefully. In response, new models emerged, most famously lean manufacturing and just-in-time production, which sought to preserve Ford's efficiency while reintroducing flexibility and continuous improvement. Even these models, however, exist as refinements of Ford's original insight. They do not reject standardization, they negotiate with it. The conversation never moves beyond Ford. It moves around him. In the modern era, the questions Ford's legacy raises have shifted again. Automation and artificial intelligence now extend the assembly line into digital space. Algorithms perform repetitive tasks at speeds humans cannot match. The logic of decomposition and optimization lives on abstracted into software. Once again, productivity rises. Once again, the human role is questioned. The same tension Ford introduced a century ago returns in new form when systems become too efficient. Where does human value reside? At the same time, sustainability forces a reckoning Ford could not have imagined. Mass production assumed infinite resources and infinite demand. Today, environmental limits expose the cost of that assumption. Efficiency alone is no longer enough. Systems must now account for regeneration, circularity, and long-term impact. The factories Ford inspired were built to produce endlessly. The factories of the future must learn when not to produce, when to repair, reuse, and slow down. This requires a different kind of intelligence, one that treats efficiency as a tool rather than a religion. Ford's most enduring lesson, then, is not that efficiency is wrong, but that it is incomplete. Efficiency without adaptability becomes fragility. Efficiency without humanity becomes alienation. Efficiency without responsibility becomes extraction. The genius of Ford was in showing what was possible when process was taken seriously. The challenge of our time is learning how to take process seriously without allowing it to eclipse purpose. In this light, Henry Ford's true revolution is still unfinished. He taught the world how to build at scale. He did not teach it how to stop, reflect, or redesign scale when circumstances change. That task falls to later generations. The systems Ford created made modern life possible. They also made modern problems visible. To reject Ford entirely would be naive. To repeat him uncritically would be dangerous. And this is the final lesson of Ford. The innovator who revolutionized manufacturing progress begins with discipline, but it endures only through wisdom. The assembly line unlocked prosperity by imposing order on chaos. The next evolution of manufacturing must learn how to impose meaning on order itself. As long as societies continue to wrestle with how to balance efficiency, flexibility, and human worth, Henry Ford's shadow will remain present, not as a warning to abandon systems, but as a reminder that every system we build eventually asks us what kind of world it is building in return.